Are you looking to expand your aesthetic practice and attract high-quality new patients? Discover the power of digital marketing in growing your practice with a personalized strategy session. Schedule your meeting today by visiting www.businessofesthetics.org/MSM and take the first step towards transforming your practice with the potential of digital marketing.
You're invited to join our exclusive monthly webinar brought to you by the Business of Aesthetics community. Don't let this chance slip through your fingers. Secure your spot now for a game-changing experience. Register for free on our homepage at www.businessofesthetics.org and get set to transform your strategies.
You are listening to another episode of the Business of Aesthetic podcast series, brought to you by our gold sponsors, Equa Marketing. If you would like to network and share your experience with our podcast guests and other aesthetic industry professionals, join our Facebook or LinkedIn communities by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Prepare to be inspired as we introduce an esteemed professional in the field of plastic surgery. Meet Dr. Lauren Umstadt, a board-certified plastic surgeon of exceptional repute, practicing in the vibrant locale of Leawood, Kansas. Her expertise and dedication have earned her high acclaim in the industry, and today, we have the privilege of delving into her insights and experiences right here on the podcast. Without further ado, let's dive in.
Well, good morning. Today I have Dr. Claire Melancon in New Orleans. She is a facial plastic surgeon and started her own practice right out of fellowship. Currently, which we'll jump to it, but you just opened another location, it sounds like. Your practice name is Audubon Facial Plastic Surgery. Walk us through, like, out of the gates, right out of fellowship, walk us through how things have evolved over the last 3 years.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is a true honor. I love this podcast, and I'm really excited to be on with you, Lauren. But yes, similar to you, jumped the gate right out of fellowship. I think there's obviously a whole lot of pros and cons to doing that. But kind of, I didn't really feel like at the time the job that I was looking for and the type of experience I really wanted to offer patients was available. And so that kind of sparked the thought process of, well, maybe we can do this on our own. Maybe I can start my own practice for patients, not really having any idea what that would completely look like or be like. So that sort of was the impetus. And then after that, you're kind of figuring out where you want to be located, both for short-term and long-term goals and things like that. And so my husband and I both knew we wanted to be back in Louisiana. So like I said, we kind of looked around, didn't see what was anything that I wanted that would fit what I wanted for my career available at the time. And then we kind of decided to launch a practice. So, yeah.
Is that so? Right. So you knew for sure you were going to open your own practice. Did you, knowing that you wanted to be back in Louisiana, did you entertain joining another practice before you decided to do that?
I did go in several interviews. And like I said, I just didn't feel like there was anything one that really would allow the cosmetic side of my practice to thrive. There were a lot of like bigger hospital systems that I felt fairly desperate for some ENT facial plastics trained people, but I definitely didn't feel like there was enough support for the cosmetic side to be a focus, which is what I spent my entire fellowship learning and what I wanted to do. So the jobs really weren't there. And then I felt like there also is kind of a niche, especially in where I am now in New Orleans, for not a ton. There wasn't really a ton of female facial plastic surgeons here doing just cosmetics. So I felt like there was a nice niche there. We always, like I said, wanted to be back close to family in Louisiana. So we settled on New Orleans, we love the city. With all of its pros and cons, but also felt like in a long-term perspective, with the goal of creating a destination practice, it's such a great city for patients to come visit. So we felt like that was a good option from a long-term growth perspective. So yeah.
But so you make the decision you want to go on your own. How long does it take from that decision day until when you actually open your doors?
Well, so I think I made that decision sort of like the halfway point through my fellowship. It was somewhere around there. I'd gone on a couple of interviews and just felt like that was the route that we were going to take. And so my initial plan was to be able to take like a month off. I left fellowship pregnant with twins, so I wanted to kind of settle in New Orleans a little bit, and then open in September. I didn't end up being able to do that because for a number of reasons, things always take longer than you think when you're building out a practice, but also we had a giant hurricane, Ida, so that was like delayed us by about 6 weeks. So I got a little bit more time than I think I was bargaining for. So if anyone's thinking about building a practice, I would definitely say estimate that it will be almost double probably what you're thinking in terms of when you can open most of the time. I think especially in the post-COVID era, a lot of the supply chains and things are just unpredictable. Quality of labor, that sort of thing. So.
For sure. And when we were down in New Orleans, I got to see your beautiful office. For those that aren't familiar with your practice, give us a sense of the great location that you're in, the setup of your office, talk about your decision to do some minor procedures there and then be credentialed at a local surgery center.
Yeah, so I loved designing my office. I know similar to you, I felt like it was an expression of who I was. I had an art background, so I really loved building out the space. I chose this location specifically in New Orleans because it borders a lot of the older portions, like the beautiful uptowns right by Audubon Park. So I felt like we could reach those demographics, but also still have a younger kind of hip vibe with the younger magazine street hustle. So the location has proven to be a really great thing for us, that kind of curbside appeal. The office, especially the front facing portions of the office, are really, really beautiful. And I feel like that's been a nice both to work there, but also from a patient perspective, experience for the patient. And so I sort of picked to live in I do live here, but to be in like one of the more expensive areas of New Orleans, I think that is something you have to consider when you're starting the benefit equation of the expenses versus how much benefit that location is going to give you. So obviously my overhead from a location standpoint is a little bit higher, but I definitely think that has paid for itself. I would do that over again for sure. I think in building an office, I fell prey to what most of us tend to fall into, and thinking that we're going to be just fine in a smaller space. And then, you definitely start feeling pretty tight at about, a year or two in. So definitely feel that, but we definitely make it work. It's more of a boutique feel, which again fits with the magazine street vibe here. So.
And then let's fast forward a little bit. Talk about, I saw that you're now seeing patients in a second location.
Yeah, so so we call it New Orleans, Greater New Orleans is kind of the South Shore. There's a whole North Shore area across a lake. And it's one of the fastest growing regions in our state. It's also, it tends to have a great patient population. And it's fairly untouched in terms of facial plastics. There's not really any designated person over there who's doing just facial plastics. And so I felt like it was a great opportunity to build up that portion of my practice. I already have patients that commute. And I kind of just, we're interested also long-term in maybe moving out there, from a space perspective. So but the decision to open over there, I'm leasing space from a general plastic surgeon, which has worked out beautifully. Right now it's just a few days a month, with hopes to continue to build that up. It's been very successful so far, so I do imagine that will continue to build. I just kind of looked around me at different peers or people who are just down the road from me in my industry. And I felt like in New Orleans, the big challenge with New Orleans is it's kind of landlocked. And so I felt like the potential for growth um, was not as big as I wanted. And so I felt like this could be an option, to kind of build up a practice kind of in a different area that's a hugely growing area with a great patient population. So a lot of need there, a lot of demand there. A lot of my patients have mentioned it a bunch. So that was the thought process. And so far it's been very, very successful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, day one, you open your doors, tell us what your team consisted of, and then fast forward to today and tell us who your team is now.
So I opened the doors with one staff member, and we have now grown fast forward to 3, and then also and a half, like a part-time person. But the first person was, I've just kind of always been of the mentality to grow organically with my practice. As we do well, then we hire with kind of everything across the board. And so the first person, she kind of just like did everything. She was primarily front desk, kind of office administrator. Then fairly quickly, I hired a medical assistant full time, and then an esthetician full time who also doubled as a medical assistant. And so we've been pretty okay with that. I think you always kind of feel like you need more people, but we're okay right now. And of course, adding the second location is with different staff. So
Do you utilize the general surgeon's staff when you're there, or do you use your own staff?
For some of it, I utilize their staff, and then I also bring my medical assistant with me. She also serves as our patient care coordinator, so she kind of does all of that side of things. And so she comes with me right now. So I think down the road that will probably split, but at least in the beginning, until we're kind of going over there every week and that sort of thing, keep it how it is.
And then we had talked previously, you had mentioned that when you first went to the New Orleans community, it was maybe a tighter knit community, not perhaps super open to new surgeons coming in. Tell us how you navigated that, what you've done to meet other surgeons in the area and kind of break down those perceived walls.
Yeah, I actually, I think I was warned by several people when I came here, and that was probably what we were referencing at the very beginning, just about the community here. I actually have to say I kind of feel differently about that. I feel like I have been very lucky to have a lot of the colleagues that are here have been very collegial and, helpful when I've needed anything. I think I'm one that really craves community, and I definitely miss having, the all of the conversations at work that you had in residency and fellowship, where you could kind of brainstorm and do all of those things. I wouldn't say that I have that here per se. I'd still love to find somebody in my community who would be comfortable with those type of conversations. But I do feel like overall it's been great to have quote unquote competition that is still very collegial. And so that's been great. I've been pleasantly surprised by that. I also think like you have a choice when you go in to, like how you present yourself, and there's opportunities all the time. You see other people's work, and it's how you handle those things. Give people the benefit of the doubt, never talk bad about other surgeons. And I mean, I think that stuff goes a long way. And there's definitely the people who do that, and I think it's fairly apparent when that you kind of like to dig your own grave with that stuff. I think you just have to, if you want to have great colleagues, you have to be a good colleague. So
for sure. Let's talk a little bit about some of the business books, contents, people. How did you, we get very little business training Did you learn a lot of that in fellowship? Did you teach yourself it through books and podcasts? Are you one that just kind of learns along the way?
I think probably a mix of all of those things. I did Russ Creidel's fellowship in Houston, which was a great experience. Overall, I do think from a modern perspective, it was like paper charts and things. So I did have to learn a lot of and he's been around forever, so it wasn't as heavy into marketing like a new surgeon. He didn't have to market at all, essentially. So, I did have to fill in some of the gaps there, but, I definitely think I had a great training from a like running a business standpoint, learning things I wanted to do, things I didn't want to do, and kind of troubleshooting that as I was building my practice. I definitely think podcasts like the one that we're on right now is very helpful. A lot of just hearing other people's experience. I think talking to people who are a few years ahead has been super helpful. Or even like people in the same phase, just kind of like, what are you doing? Like, did you try this? Or, what did you negotiate? Or what did you do in this situation? And then a lot of it really truly is like trial by fire, especially when it comes to, HR and, trying to learn how to handle people and, when to fire, when to hire, when to, do all of these things. Especially when that's not like your natural, I don't love like having those type of conversations. So maybe nobody does, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I think I came in with rose-colored glasses, as we probably all do. I thought, as a senior resident, you're running an entire team. As a chief, there's a lot of moving parts. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, this will be the same. The biggest thing I didn't realize, which sounds so stupid in retrospect, is that the people that work in your office now are nowhere near a surgical resident in terms of their life.
Right.
Their grit, their training, their desire to want to live at work. I think my biggest shift has been in not treating them like residents, which they're not,
Yeah.
and I don't know, what are some of the lessons that you have learned with your team?
I think I'm still learning a lot. I think I'll be the first to say I don't know everything about inspiring a team and doing all of these things. I think I'm very happy with the team that we have right now. So I'm grateful for that, but I've also learned not to take it for granted. We went through a phase of, I think I fired 4 different people in the front office kind of position over a span of 6 months. It was really tough to find somebody motivated, with a good work ethic. I mean, the stories that we have, just shocking to me. Just human nature, but I think I have learned how to be a little bit more assertive with what I want. I think without as much concern for feelings. I think I always was kind of like timid in the beginning about. I still hate those conversations, but I do them more because I think once you realize like it's not just about them, it's actually not about them. It's about the patients that are coming in your door. Then it gives you a higher purpose to be able to say, okay, well, you need to be here. You're persistently late. The patients are waiting at the door, or whatever it is. Like you have to. It gives you a little bit more of a higher purpose and hopefully communicates that to that person. So it's not a personal thing. It's just like, this needs to be done. And then being a little bit quicker to let people go. I think I remember the first person I fired. I mean, I was literally about to sob my eyes out. It was very hard. We built that practice together, but the moment, I let her go, it was just this huge sense of relief. And I think I just continually remember that, as we go forward, not being afraid to do that, because it is really about patients. It's not about them or you, really, at the end of the day. I mean, of course, you want to love people you work with. That's really important. But that when you're disciplining somebody or letting people go, typically it's to preserve your vision for your practice and your patient experience. So.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a challenge for me to give candid feedback. I feel like I just come off as a bitch and I don't want to, but I also don't know how to deliver the message that I want without
Yeah.
sounding cold, you know?
I think I followed the same, so like, we do when we do our meetings together, I follow the same kind of format for every review. And it's like, here's the things that you're doing well. So every time there's something you're doing well, and every time there's something you need to work on, target areas. So I think it's more of like anticipated that there will be some target areas, so it's a little less like, no, that's not being saying if there's a specific instance that's like you have to correct, that's different, right? But for just like general reviews, I feel like that's kind of been helpful to have just like a standard format to where it's like maybe a little less, I don't know, coming harsher or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned you trained with Dr. Kreidel. He's well known for rhinoplasty and revision rhinoplasty. Your practice today, give us a sense of what the makeup is. It sounds like it's all cosmetic. How much rhinoplasty versus aging face? How do you navigate these complex revision rhinoplasties, which I would never sleep again if I took on revision rhinoplasties.
So right now I think I have a fairly like um diverse practice in terms of, I think it's probably about say 50 to 60% rhinoplasty and about 40 to 50% aging face. Um, of the rhinoplasties, I'd say nearly half are revision, tough revision cases. I actually love them. I think that is because I did study with Dr. Kreidel. And I do think like if you're going to tackle those cases, you need to go to a fellowship that you do a ton of them because they're not scary once you kind of have your plan A, B, C, D, and E, of what you're going to do. So I do enjoy those cases, and that has been a nice niche here. There's a couple people, but not a lot of people who do revisions in the city, so that's been nice. And then really kind of initially it was a lot more rhinoplasty heavy. In the last year or so, it's definitely blossomed into a lot more facelifts and aging face and things like that. So it's kind of the breadth right now, and I'd like to keep it that way for a while.
Yeah. You mentioned that you were pregnant with twins when you opened your practice. Congratulations, by the way. They're now, are they are they 3?
They'll be 3 in December.
Oh my goodness. Well, talk a little bit about, if you're comfortable, your decision to have kids and how that's played into being a surgeon. It's something that I had really never talked about to anybody when I was a medical student or a resident. So I think it's this topic that really needs to be talked about because there are a lot of trainees out there, whether they're pre-med in med school or residency, that are potentially interested in having kids, but are totally kind of afraid of that whole picture and how it even works.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll be the first to say I think I worked really, really hard to have those kids. That did not come easy for me once I decided I was ready. Of course, I waited forever. And then when we were ready, I was like, oh, this is not as easy now that I'm older and living a high stress life and all of these things. So finally, whenever we were successful, I knew that would always be a huge priority for me and how I set up my career. And I think, yes, it was very stressful to open a practice and have twins. But some people before me, who had done similar things with similar timing, like there will never be a better time from a loss of revenue standpoint and time perspective. And I kind of hung on to that whenever, I was 3 months in and having to take off for a few weeks for to take care of the kids. And so I have no regrets in that regard. And I think I would tell anyone who earnestly desires to have children and that be a part of your life, don't wait on it. Just do what you have to do for yourself and surround yourself with, look for that when you're in training for a supportive department, supportive fellowships, things like that. If it's important to you, just, I think that is a priority. But In designing my practice, that was also a huge part of my why, right? Like, obviously, I did a ton of these things because I love plastic surgery. I love facial plastic surgery. And I love designing my practice, the patient experience, all of those things. But I also wanted to be able to be the best mom I could be within my career. And so I love that I can completely control my schedule. You know, in the beginning, I scheduled it to where I could still pump, or go home. I lived close by to the office. I'd go home and occasionally breastfeed the babies, and loved that I was able to do that. Now, as they're older, on Mondays, I come in late typically and drop, because it's my day to drop them off at school. I've rearranged my lunch schedule, so sometimes I can pop over and see them when they're with the nanny. And so I love having that control to be able to do that. I think it allows me to be completely focused when I'm at work, because I don't feel like I'm missing out with my kids as much as I could be in a very time intensive career. I just won't let my hours get there right now. And it's not like I'm saying I'm super balanced, because I'm not that balanced. I need to be probably a little more balanced. But I do love that I've been able to be both fully present. I feel like fully present with my kids in this phase of life, as well as when I'm at work, having the support system to be able to not worry about them, and be able to fully commit at work. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like I opened my own practice for the same reason. I just wanted autonomy over my life and my schedule, which
yeah,
I have now. I'm also not super balanced, but we all have those target areas, right?
we do.
What am I?
We do. We do. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit, let's jump back to the business stuff. So, sometimes I think back to like when I first opened a practice, and I think it was probably good how naive I was. I think it would have been too overwhelming had I known how complex things were going to be. What are some of the you talked about the hurricane being quite the hiccup in opening, and some of the team challenges. What have been some other challenges, maybe in terms of expenses, equipment, vendors or purchases?
I think I had no idea about all the random expenses that we really, from a tax perspective, from a, all the insurances, how much all that really in reality costs. And we had the hurricane hit, and then all insurance stuff skyrocketed. My first to second year, they doubled, in price. So, all of the estimates you have kind of previously have to morph with all of that. So I just don't think there's like any guidebook out there, and that just is like, oh, here's all of the little tiny licenses and things that you're just gonna have to pay for to just exist. It's not even really function well, it's just to exist. So I definitely was not prepared from that perspective, what overhead would actually be like. I also think on different things, like I you kind of live and learn, like sometimes it's not worth it to add an additional product, even though it seems like it's selling well in the beginning. I did that with a certain filler line and really couldn't get that inventory off of the shelf, and so ended up really having essentially wasted a lot of resources. I think being a little bit more intentional with what you market, like you don't need the breadth of everything, especially when you're just starting out. Having just a few things that you're, offering and marketing well, because if you're not marketing it well, it won't sell itself just sitting there. And so some of those things I think I learned along the way, being a little bit more hesitant to just add in something because it seems like other people are doing it, or it's all the rage or something like that. And I think after kind of learning that initial lesson, that's actually saved me quite a bit along the way, from following the trends and things like that. I think from trying to add in devices type of thing, I waited a while to add in a laser microneedling device. I still think in hindsight, maybe I would have waited even longer, because I also hired an esthetician at the time and she was new. So having to build up that practice, I think arguably you could argue to potentially wait a little, until you have a established practice for your esthetician. And now I don't regret it at all. It's wonderful. It's a great source of revenue. But, in the beginning, I think you probably could, there's a little gray area with when you decide to pull the trigger on that. So those are kind of some of the lessons I've learned so far. I keep learning every day.
I'll be honest, I had no idea how much these devices cost. Like I
Same.
still remember when you bought your hydrofacial and you told me the cost, and my like jaw dropped, and I was like, I will never pay that. And here I am, and I've got one down the hallway now. So
And you're like, wow, this is one of the more affordable ones.
right. I feel like you almost get desensitized to the number of zeros behind
100%. 100%.
oh
Pretty much everything.
yeah.
The things that are coming in and coming out. It's like a constant flow. So
Yeah. I think, and it's hard to know. I don't know. I feel like the stuff that I offer in clinic should be things that I personally would do to myself. So it's like there's so many great stuff out there that are coming to the market, but also half of that will probably not do great,
right. Well, and I think that the key of like really having a distinct marketing plan for every single purchase that you have through the practice, like ahead of time before you take it on as an expense, having a real design for how you're going to market it. I kind of just initially feel like I was a little bit laissez-faire about that, and I kind of expected it to market itself essentially. And so I think I've really learned a lot about, trying to have a lot more intentional marketing and cross marketing too. Obviously, like you said, we shouldn't have anything that we don't believe in. And so for the right patient, really getting good at staff talking about, oh, well, you may be interested in this, or myself included, I get hesitant to upsell. That's integrity is such a huge portion of my brand. But in the right patient, I think it is important to just so people know that you have, a laser or whatever it is. And incorporating a lot of those big expense items, into the whole patient experience. This has been really helpful for me, in learning how to do that. For all of our operative patients, we'll put in a complimentary hydrofacial to both expose them to the device and also have really beautiful, clean skin right before their surgery. So things like that have been really helpful.
That's awesome. Yeah, I actually stole that idea from you. Now I'm offering complimentary hydrofacial style or surgery patients, and I feel like it's this like sweet little treat before they have their big surgery. And so thank you for that.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I think the retention rate on that, at least in my practice, has been really great. People coming back too. So.
What are some of the marketing avenues that you've used, whether it be social media, email campaigns, local advertising through magazines and so forth? What have you found helpful?
I think it's different things for different times. When I first opened, I did, was not necessarily a social media powerhouse. I always wish that I were a little bit more consistent and better in that. But I did a lot of Google ads right when I opened, which I felt were helpful in the initial sort of like 6-month time period. And then kind of transitioned away from that. I don't do any right now. I just did one that was like on the north for the new location. But otherwise I don't do any Google ads anymore. They're just so expensive for what you get out of them. And I think it's great for when you're just opening your doors in a highly competitive area. But it's after a while, I don't think it pays for itself. I think the most valuable source of marketing or getting people in the door to me has been networking with local providers. I think now most of my referrals are word of mouth. I do get the social media. We do social media. We do all of those things, and I definitely get patients from there. But I think in terms of the highest quality and consistent leads that I get, it's really from like local dermatologists, other providers in town, general plastics, just depending on what it is. And so I would encourage anyone, especially when you're starting out, to just go meet, all of your cosmetic dermatologists in town. Have an agreement where you're not going to take their patients and don't take their patients. But a lot, that can be a really valuable referral source. And then, also not just like going to meet them and being done, after you've been in practice and you have all of your beautiful before and afters, try to continue to maintain those relationships. I think have been really helpful for me overall.
Did you hire anybody to help you with marketing, like a consulting firm in terms of Google AdWords, or did you do all that yourself?
So I have an SEO company and a Google who also manage my Google ads at the time. Yeah. And that's all in terms of who I hire. That's all that I hire out for marketing. I have done ads in local papers, magazines and things like that. I think a lot for networking. A lot of the local magazines here do a lot of networking with other business owners. So you kind of are not only, I don't necessarily think it brings like a patient in the door, but it also puts me in touch with a whole community of business owners, which I think is helpful from a business perspective. Just in things that my business may need, referrals, all of that. Less so kind of like a distinct ROI. If like, I don't think people like, oh, there's her picture, I'm going to go see her for surgery,
Mm-hmm.
So, but I don't hire out anything else besides the online stuff.
Nice.
And as SEO has grown, which has been great, definitely that kind of takes the spot of the Google ads and all of that.
Yeah. Some of the content I'm listening to now talks about AI and its role in marketing. We've dabbled a little bit into AI in terms of helping us brainstorm different social media posts. I've used it a little bit in terms of staff, like teaching, education. Have you used AI in your practice? If so, or no?
No, I have not. It's kind of like just one more thing to add at this
Yeah.
point. I think I would love to be on the cutting edge of these things, but I think I'm gonna have to be spoon fed that one down the way. It seems pretty daunting to me right now.
Yeah.
But people who use it swear by it, so I think I definitely think it's something to become educated about on the horizon for sure.
Mhm.
So,
What goals do you have for your practice in the next couple of years?
well, I think I think you always want to keep growing. I think that's obviously number one is how do you do that and what does that look like? For me, I really would like to be able to fully establish a second location. It's well on its way. I think that will be a great source of more patients and things like that. And I think I'd like to continue to expand the destination side of my practice that has been kind of continuing to grow. And so that's sort of my focus is creating that experience for patients, the whole package type of thing. So yeah, I think those are just continued growth. And then, as the lease ends here in a few years, I'll start looking at a building, which will be kind of a whole different adventure. So I'll be calling you a lot.
I'll be here. I don't know how much help I'll be, but you can certainly learn from my mistakes and failures. Yeah, we're actually, it just never ends, Claire. So with our surgery center, obviously things are much more robust in terms of regulation and all that. But
Mhm.
even this morning, I had to get to the office early to meet with a generator testing company because they have to test our generator every 6 months. And just like you said,
Yeah,
like things that you just don't even know when you
yeah,
first start.
not at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Um, when we go to meetings, these big academic meetings, there is always a lecture, whether you go to it or not, on exit strategy. And I know that we are both like so early in our career and so young, but is that something that you think about at all right now? Or perhaps not strictly exit, but also diversification of revenue and
Yeah.
providers in your office that are bringing in money. I would say one of my biggest fears is that I'm going to break my arm and
Yeah.
be out of commission for 8 weeks or whatever. As you look to the future, one, do you think about the exit strategy? And two, if you think about, have you thought about bringing on other providers besides an esthetician?
Yes, I think about exit strategy all the time. Both my husband and I do. Not because I don't love what I do, but because I think that's a huge mistake and that people don't think about it, especially in surgery. Those who are business minded tend to prioritize that from the very beginning. I think it's not something necessarily taught or bred into us from the beginning. And so for me, it's all about where you have equity, right? Like, and so that's sort of the thought into, I will own my building at some point. Now that I initially kind of didn't go that route because I really honestly wasn't sure if the risk to me was worth it at the time. I didn't know if I was going to love this or it was just so new. But now that we're into it, I think that that's really one of the only ways to go in terms of building, having that as equity when you exit. I also think often about other providers. I think, to me, it's always that conflict between you want to protect your brand so much, and finding the right person, I think is going to be the biggest challenge. I think when that person comes along, whether it's another physician or an APP. If the right person comes along, I'm completely open to it. I think I'm not just going to go seek it out though if I don't have the right person, because I think it can be really damaging to your brand if you have the wrong person. But I love what Edwin Williams. I listen to all of these podcasts. What he's built there. I think it's incredible. So sort of looking forward, I think that will be on the horizon if the right person comes available, starting there. And I think building up the med spa side of things, I'd like to continue to do that. I think my biggest thing with those is, again, you really have to, especially in the med spa side of thing, have to protect your integrity, because there's a lot of things out there that people say do all of these things and they just don't, and so I think it's your job as a surgeon and physician who's taken the Hippocratic oath and to really kind of look over all of that and be careful with your marketing and how we're branding those things and selling them to patients. And so I'd love to build that up, but with that focus on integrity.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I have so enjoyed talking to you. Is there anything else that you feel like would be helpful to tell those out there who are thinking about opening their own practice?
Oh, I think I would just say make sure you get a group of other physicians that you can text with all of your questions and problems like we all have, because I think that's been so helpful, to have your peers who are doing the same thing as you or people just ahead of you, kind of to help you sort through all of the craziness, because there's all tons of unexpected stuff, but chances are somebody else is either going through it or has gone through the same thing, and that's really helpful. So both to inspire you and encourage you. So
yeah, for sure. I love I call it the girl group text because it's all female facial plastic surgeons. And I think it's mostly helpful, but sometimes it's just great to kind of commiserate with one another about the different challenges of the very complex specialty that we all chose and the team dynamics, some of us are in academics, some of us are private practice, some of us are solo. And then also the difficult surgeries we do, the complex patients that we manage. So yeah, very
absolutely.
thankful.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, tell us if anyone's interested in getting a hold of you, either from a business standpoint or if there are any potential patients listening that want to go see Dr. Melancon in New Orleans, where can people find you?
I think probably easiest is just on social media, through Instagram. It's at Dr. Claire Melancon, Melancon, Melancon for those not in Louisiana. And then or at Ottoman Facial Plastics. So it's probably the easiest way, just a DM the office and somebody will get back to you, or I will.
Well, perfect. Thanks, Claire.
All right. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Business of Aesthetic podcast series, brought to you by our gold sponsor, Equa Marketing. Would you like to join our growing group of aesthetic industry experts and get featured on the Business of Aesthetics podcast? Or do you know someone who would love to share their strategies for growth in the aesthetic business, providing quality patient care or their clinical expertise? Head over to www.businessofesthetics.org podcast show and apply to be featured as a guest on the show. Remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen. If you would like to engage with today's speakers or any of our past speakers, join our Facebook group or LinkedIn group by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Thank you, and have a great day.